let's do that a little bit better. Let me find out how my audio is for a moment. Alright, this could stand to go a little bit lower. How's this? How's this? Let me see to myself. I guess that sounds pretty good. Alright. Hello everybody. How are you all doing today? My name is Borden. And I am here today with a special stream because I missed the one yesterday. I had some things that I had to do, and so I'm here with you today to talk to you about the stuff that I do in my actual life, which is programming. And a few other people have always said like, oh, like I like programming, or like how can I get started with it and stuff. Well, I can't help with all of that, but I can certainly do a few things here to try to make it a bit more approachable, and to just sort of explain basically how programs work by sort of poking around borrrbot a bit and seeing how he works. If you don't know, borrrbot is my chatbot. He's offline at the moment because obviously we're going to be working on him today, or explaining various things, you know, stopping and starting him and seeing, you know, how that affects things. So why don't I go back over to here, back over to this project I have. This is borrrbot's project here. And it's really small. I don't think I can make this side any bigger, but you got the projects from. Don't pay attention to these two. They're not. They're sort of separate. The stuff that I was working on with. The main three are right here, and this is the actual one that's what we call an executable. And the rest of these are called shared libraries. Now what the difference between those two are is that the executable is the one that's going to actually run stuff. That's the thing that you double click on in Windows, or you know, maybe if you're a little bit more advanced you can type in the program name on the command line, but what you're doing is you're running the executable. Shared libraries are not run by themselves. They're basically just a collection of stuff that other programs use, so you don't have to write things twice, right? So this one, this executable, is going to be using logic inside of these two. So there's not actually very much stuff inside of here. I put most of it into the shared stuff so that I can reuse it between whatever I want. But this is C#. Come on now. So this is a C# program. And every single programming language works the same like this. So you got a main function. Hold on a second, my Visual Studio is deciding to be a little bit complainy at the moment. Oh, there goes the freezing. I wonder what it's on about right now. But, well, while it's thinking about that, I can sort of... Okay, it's still moving. You see here, don't worry about these keywords, static and void, but there's this thing here called main, right? This is where everything starts. This is where everything comes in. So when you start the program, the first thing it's going to do is go into here. This is just sort of an agreed upon name that the operating system can find so that it can start running your program. And when you make a program, it'll order. Crying out loud. I guess I'm gonna have to. Redo borrrbot here. Come on, borrrbot, let's go. So close all these. Back to where I was. I'm gonna try to keep this as approachable as I can to anyone who doesn't really know anything about programming. So, get rid of that because I don't need it right now. So this is actually the thing that does everything. So if I were to move all this stuff out of the way, this, let me actually move that back up. And to comment that instead. Move all that stuff out of the way. This is just a symbol that means this line is not for actually using in the program. It's called comment. When you put this in front, the compiler, which is what turns all this stuff into an actual program, will ignore this part and just skip on to the next part. So here's an empty main function. And this is basically what you start with when you learn programming for the new time. It's called the Hello World program. And so I'll press Control F5 and that'll run that. You can see that out comes this window. It says Hello World in it. And then it says press any key to continue, because after this, the way that the program works is that it goes through these lines one by one. Then when it gets to the end, that's the end of the program. So if I were to do something like this, this will make this never end and just keep going forever and ever into the console, so it looks something like this. See, it's just forever putting these hello worlds into there, just endlessly, until I kill it. So there's basic programming stuff here that I won't go too much into, but just for a review of the basics, we have variables. Usually in C# you can just type var. This is not the same as some other language which you might have seen, like JavaScript, but this will actually keep the type of the variable intact. So if I type like int x equals 0, that means that this has a value of 0. And if I type like string s equals hello, then that'll be a string. And if I try to do something like this, I'll type the dot. This gives me all the methods that I can do on that particular type of variable, in this case a string. Right, so I can't have the same on the integer because there's stuff on the string. Oh, this is pretty small, is it? Maybe I should make it bigger. I can't make the pop-up bigger, but for example, I can have something like index of. That lets me find the index. Well, think of a string as a list of characters, right? So there's H, there's E, there's L, and this is at position. You start at 0 in programming and not 1, so this is at position 0, this H is position 0, this E is position 1, this L is position 2, this L is position 3, this O is position 4, this comma is position 5, and this space is position 6. So if I type index of H, for example, this will tell me that it's at position 0. But if I try to do x.index of, like, it doesn't really make sense, because how can you have an index of a letter inside of a number, right? So this is called the type safety. And notice that if I switch to var instead, nothing changes. It still doesn't let me do it. Unlike some other languages which are creating these kinds of variables and they don't actually give it a type and just let you try to use anything that you want on it. So let's, this is also an int, so why don't we do this. Instead of 0, let's say index of h. And then I can type this funky thing here. This is just a feature of C#. If I put a $sign here in front of the string, then I can type in a variable just in line. So s x. This will print out both of these. And let's see what happens. Hello 0. Okay, good. That's exactly what I thought would happen. Or let's try L. You might think, well, wait, there's 2 L's in there. This will give me the index of the first one. Hello 2. Okay, so those are variables. And these things here, like main, with the brackets after them, just sort of hanging out here in the middle, this one too, is called, these are called functions. You can call them just by typing their name in. And then this will immediately go into here. And since I set this up to check whether or not this kind of thing exists, it'll immediately just have a problem here, invalid operation exception. But you can see how it's gone into there. See if I can find one that does exist. How about temp? Okay, so that one works. So you can tell by the way this is set up what is going to happen when you call it. So remember when I told you to not pay attention to this? This just means that it returns nothing. You can't actually do what I'm going to do on this one. This one is a hidden string, which is a class that I made, but it's going to return this. So I can actually say something like var s equals check environment temp, and that will go through this, and here it says return. It's going to give me this into here. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. Yep, there. Now you can see that my temporary directory is c users bor app data local temp. That's just something that's built into the operating system, nothing really special about that. But it does demonstrate what I was talking about, how if you call it like this, you can do a bunch of stuff and then return that. So there's a few other concepts that we have. There's a concept of loops and the concepts of conditional branching. So just a quick reminder on those. There's two main kinds of loops. There's a few others too, but the two that I use the most are for and while. You can basically do the kind of same thing with them. So while, remember before I was doing while true? This says that while this condition is true, logically, it should execute this, and then go back again to check. If it's still true, go back again to check, which is why this will go forever, because this is always true. But here's an example. Finished equals false. While finished. Oh, while not finished. This exclamation point just means the logical not of this. So false becomes true and true becomes false, if you remember your sort of high school logic lessons. And then I can set this to true. And look at that. So what do you think is going to happen here? Well, first it's going to be false. So the opposite of false is true. So this is true inside here. And then write not finished yet. But then set it to true. So now the opposite of true is false. So this is no longer true. So it goes out of here and down to here, ending up with 2 lines. Not finished yet and finished. And the other kind of loop we have here is called a for loop. This lets you go on a range of things. So for this one is a little weird looking inside because you got all this stuff going on in here, but it's actually simple when you analyze it. So inside here you got a starting condition, you got a continuation condition, and you've got an iteration condition. What that means is that it starts at 0, keeps going while it's less than equal to or 5, and each time this plus plus is the same as I equals I plus 1. So adding 1 to it. It's just a shorthand for it. So console.writeLine. This is time number then we'll put in I. Then once that's finished, line finished. So you got 10 over 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually goes 6 times. Why is that? Well, we can step through this in what we call a debugger. So let's make a debug build. It's not essential, but it makes it a little bit more reliable. So, we first now got I is 0. So it writes this is time number 0. Then it goes back to check again. Does the next thing, adds 1 to. You can see that I has become 1. But 1 is still less than or equal to 5, so we come back down here again, right? We've done everything inside the brackets. Come back up here, I++. Now it's 2. Now number 2, right? Back up here again, and so on and so forth. Until we're done, and we come out here, and then we exit the program. So, the other important thing to know, basics for review, is what we call if. This will let you test something. So let's say var x equals true. If x, it is true. This is going to complain at me because it knows that this is never going to be false, but let's just write it anyway. It is false. So, this is going to say that if this thing inside here is true, then do this. Otherwise, do this. So, it is true, right? No surprise there. What happens if we put it to false? It is false. We can do this in a little bit more of an interesting way. We can say var equals 0. Then say if x is less than 10, it is less than 10. And we can also chain these together else if, you can get another if condition going, less than 20. You can write console.write line. It is less than 20. Or, how about, it is huge. So it's 0, so it's gonna come into here. It is less than 10. But if it's more than 10, but less than 20, then it's less than 20. Because it didn't hit this condition, but it did hit this one. Or if we do that, put it up to 45, it is huge, because it didn't hit this condition, it didn't hit this condition, so this is a catch-all for everything else. Alright, so with that basic review out of the way, let's add this back in. So, some things that I'm doing in here. I have a settings file here in appsettings.json. This configuration builder is something that I got from Microsoft, microsoft.extensions.configuration. The way I installed that is by going up here, manage NuGet packages, and I search for Microsoft .extensions .configuration. So you can see that I can include pre-release versions or just the official release versions. So here's the one that I installed, and I just clicked over here on install, and that did it for me. Then I had this available for me inside my program. Let's see what happens if I remove it though. Let's remove all three. Maybe that's not the package that I got. Oh, it is, because it says it there, but borrrbot, the Visual Studio is being a little bit of a pain right now, but let me unload and reload this project real quick. I think that the logging is but you see how this is now red and says that it's not available anymore. It's because I don't have the third-party libraries installed that I need. So I know that I need to have JSON. And it'll give me a little long list of stuff to accept. And now that I've installed that, it's back to not being read anymore. So, what this does is it allows me to read information from a settings file, like this one. So, inside here, I have just some stuff that I want to be available to the program, that I want to change, be able to change without actually changing the program. So this is sort of just the external data that's getting read. And so, you'll notice that this is JSON. If you're not familiar with JSON, that's okay. This is just a collection of what we call key value pairs, or list of stuff. So the whole thing, as evidenced by this curly bracket, is a key value list of keys and values. So the storage engine, think of key values like a dictionary. Like a dictionary that you look up words in, right? So what do you do when you want to find the definition of a word? You search for that word. And then, once you've found that word, inside, there's a little meaning attached to it inside of the dictionary. So, because there's that stuff inside of the dictionary, inherently there is a meaning for one word inside of here. So that the same way, there's one meaning for one word in here. So the meaning for storage engine is this. The definition for channel is that. The definition for bot name is that. But messages is a little bit different because it starts with this, which means that there's a list of stuff inside. And not only is it a list of stuff, it's a list of more dictionaries. So every entry in here is going to have content with the value of something and interval with the value of something. Same with the responses. It's a little bit clearer because there's more than one of them here. Each one has a shortcut and a message. So when I read that into here, I've just sort of mapped that. So I got a bot name, I got a channel, here's the messages, and inside the messages there's content and interval, and then shortcut and message. So it'll give me all this information just automatically by reading from it. So let's see what happens when I run it. You can do this by pressing F5 with a breakpoint here. So clicking on that. Wish I could make this a little bit more friendly for small displays, but no such luck. But you got settings. Bot name is borrrbot, if you can make that out. Channel is Borden, my channel. And these are required. And then it'll pull down these secret stuff that I need to connect, like the OAuth and the... Oh, I used to use Spotify, that's why this is in here, but that's not getting used anymore. Like the OAuth token, that's another topic altogether, so just, it's like a password, but more secure than a password. So that gets stored in there. But I get those from a different place, because I want them to be hidden. See how it, when I hover over it, it says hidden. That's just something that I made so that it's hard to actually see the secrets. I don't want to be putting out the secrets onto my stream, because then I'll have to go and change all of them. And that's annoying. But here's where the real fun stuff starts. This bot and bot engine are something that I made to help me out with. And if I were to make this public, then both of these, no, this one would be something that everybody could use. It's a reusable component. Okay? So bot engine is a good place to start, because this is kind of like the life of what borrrbot can do, or any bot really. It doesn't have to be borrrbot, but you see how we're making a bot engine. That's this class here, bot engine. So let's put a breakpoint in here. Make sure that I don't I don't want to be showing those two things. So, I pass in the bot. Don't worry about what the bot is right now, because that's something else, but that we'll go into in a minute. But what it does do is implement an interface. The bot is of type ibot, and by convention in C#, an interface will start with capital letter I. Now an interface is basically like a contract, saying that anything that identifies itself as this thing, this ibot thing, it's going to be able to do this stuff. It's guaranteed to be able to do everything in this list. Okay, so it has this is a C#4, this is a property, means it has a read-only string, which is like a word, or a sentence. In this case, it would be a word, indicating the bot's name. It has a hidden string indicating the bot's authentication token. It has a string indicating the bot's desired channel name. This is the one that the bot wants to connect to. And IEnumerable just means I can extract one or more, well, 0 or more things from this of the type. Type in C# is just the type of object that things are. Don't worry too much about that. But it's basically things like this. Like bot engine is a type. String is a type. Even ibot is a type. Hidden string is a type. And they're all identified by type. It's not the actual object itself, it's just what kind of object that it is. That is interesting to me here. So I have two. I have one for the getBot commands and one for getBot components. I made this distinction. This is just my terminology. The commands will all be things that will react to things from the chat room, and the components will be things that do something else. And then this is specific to another topic that I won't get into right now, because it's optional. But here's the ibot command. So you'll see anything that identifies itself, this is an interface again. Anything that identifies itself as an ibot command will have a command permission. Command permission is of type enum. What enum means is that we're assigning words to numbers so that they're easier to remember. You could, of course, just say permission is 0, 1, or 2, and just remember that 0 means this, and 1 means that, and 2 means that, but instead, this is an enumeration, enum, which says that user will take on the value 0, and moderator will take on the value 1, and owner will take on the value 2, and I could probably make another one called subscriber here, but that'll be a future enhancement. So, I have this enum set up. User means that any user can use the command, moderator means that only moderators can, and owner means that only the streamer can use the command. So you got permission as a property, read only. If it were able to be written to as well, then it would have a set here. Oh, and public, by the way, in case you're wondering, just means that anybody, anywhere, referencing this set of code can see this. There's other stuff that we don't want to show to everybody, that we keep inside, just for our own use. That's a different, something other than public. So it also has a shortcut command, which is also read-only. And then it has these two methods. Handle command, and it'll pass in the username who sent the command, and the arguments of the command from the chat. and initialize. This will set up the command with the bot engine in case it needs to do something. I'll show you examples of those later when we get into the commands. But let's go over to what a component is first. This is iBot component. Again, it's an interface, which means that this is a contract of things that anything that identifies itself as an iBot component can do this. And a component is meant to do something every set amount of time. So this is a class this class is just a kind of object in C# that allows you to represent a span of time. Well, as it says, time span. So, you know, you can do like milliseconds, or seconds, or minutes. It's just good. It's instead of just like a number, you get an actual concrete set of time that you can check how many minutes it is, how many seconds it is, and so on and so forth. And there's two methods. There's one for activate, and that will set up this component if it needs to be set up. And there's perform, which is to trigger it to actually do what it's designed to do. And the reason that that's visible from the outside is because I have another part here. This is called the component schedule, and you see this one is not public. This one is internal. In C#, internal means that anything that's inside this project here can see this. But outside the project, for example in borrrbot.commands or in borrrbot here, they can't see it. So if I try to make a new component scheduler here, let's just make a little space here. Scheduler equals component scheduler. Oops. New component scheduler. It's gonna complain. What's that? And it's actually, it can see that it's not meant for accessing here, and it says, I'll read, the component scheduler is inaccessible due to its protection level. Cannot access internal class component scheduler here. In the programming world, this is called encapsulation, which means that we hide some logic from the outside user because it's not important for them. They don't need to know how we schedule things, they just need to be able to implement things according to the interface. But, as the inside developer, here is how things work. So when I create a component scheduler, it's going to come inside of here. When you see just public or internal or private or protected or something like that, and then the name of the class, that's called a constructor. And inside that's how you create these things. So you can see here inside of bot engine, I have new component scheduler. This can actually do it because bot engine is also in the same project. So that's going to come into here and create a timer. This timer is part of the C# language spec, so this is provided by default for you. And it is a class which will execute arbitrary logic on a set amount of time, just like an actual timer like you have in your kitchen. So, you know, in the kitchen you twist the thing, and then when it's done, it's beep, it's done. So the same idea here. So this is a little bit complicated, but you can also activate this, and it's going to go through all of the actual components that get registered. We'll talk about registration later, but they all get stored in here. All the components that the outside user wants to use on borrrbot, they get stored in here. and then they all can get activated when the entire scheduler is activated. And then they all get scheduled. So it's gonna, this schedule method will look at the ibot component, and remember, ibot component is just an interface. It has these things available to it: interval, activate, and perform. So it's gonna look at the when it's gonna want to fire the next time. So it's got the interval that it wants to fire at. Let's say it's 10 seconds. This will give me the time now plus the 10 seconds, and that'll be the next time that this thing wants to fire. And so it'll add that to the schedule. The schedule is just a sorted... The dictionary is the thing that I described to you before, where each key gets a value. Like in a dictionary, when you look up something, you find the value next to it. The value in this case of the actual English language dictionary being the definition of the word. But in this case, I have a, like, sort of a dictionary of date times. So dates and times, like July 30th at 7 p.m. That's a date time. And each date time has an associated component with it. So I'll add this time that I just calculated to the schedule, and then since it's sorted, it's going to be added so that the next one, the earliest one, is at the beginning, and the latest one is at the end. So if I only have one item, that means that I just added the only one, and so I need to change the timer to be executing at this time. Because if I want my component to be 10 seconds from now, and nothing else is scheduled, then obviously the next time to run is 10 seconds from now. But if there's more than one item, I just want to check if it's the first one. If it's the first one, that means that, well, by chance I put in another bot component that is the earliest one. And so if the one that I've put in is the earliest one, then I need to change the timer to fire at that time instead, because then I will be firing at the correct time. I don't want to miss that time that the component wants to fire at. And this is a private method. This means that this is only visible to this class itself, inside of here. But this is where things actually happen. So it checks to see if there's anything in the schedule. If not, then it goes back. Then it just returns, which means it ends. And then it removes the first one and calls perform on it. That's this thing back here that we promised that we'd have. Oops. Call perform, and then we add in the next earliest time. And so on and so forth. So each time we take the first one out, we do whatever it wants to do, look at the next one for how long we have to wait, and then wait that long. And that creates a sort of like schedule of when things are going to get run. And I use that, for example, for the repeating message functionality. So this, the engine has the ability to, basically it's for two things. It's for registering and running commands and components, and it's also for, I wrote this API for, API just means a set way of dealing with things. So OBS itself, the thing that Twitch streamers used to, and possibly others use to record and or stream videos, actually has an API, which means Application Programming Interface. It is a list of things that it can do. And there's documentation on it, but the documentation is pretty weak. And so what I've done is I kind of experimented with it and broken it down so that I can get stuff like the audio service. So like here, remember, interface means things that it can do. Description, ID type, blah blah blah. So these are all stuff that you can get, like audio service, for example. I can get the audio devices, I can get sources and stuff like that, get sources for the current scene. So anything that you do inside of Streamlabs OBS, or regular OBS, or OBS Live, they all share the same basis, so they all share the same API. You can do. I haven't implemented all of it, but I've gotten the, at least the, everything that you can do defined. And I use that for my dance command, where I twirl around the video. I can show that to you a little bit later, but that's a big part of what borrrbot can do, that interacting with OBS. I don't know if there's any other bots that can do that. It has to be running on the same machine though. In theory you can do it over the internet, but it's a real pain. Alright, so what is this? Alright, that's nothing. So let's close all these. So inside, this is borrrbot.commands. These are commands that I've developed specifically for borrrbot. So when I split this out into different projects, I wanted to put if I were to put something out in the open, I would put the engine out into the open. People can define their own commands and components. But for example here, I have defined the timed message component. And you can see by this :ibot component, that means this object promises to do everything that this thing says. So this thing says, remember from before, interval, activate, perform. And so all those need to be present on this object. And they are. Here's interval, here's activate, and here's perform. So let's see what's going on here. So interval, I've actually exposed to everything else to just let the pick its own interval. You might have noticed from before, I have messages, and here's content, and here's interval. This interval is going to not immediately, but I named them the same thing so that I can just set it directly from here to here. I know myself that I set this up so that I'm going to treat this as minutes, so 10 minutes. And then I'm going to set the message to this. It's going to say, hello, I'm borrrbot. I was created by Borden to help out in the room. Type commands to see what I can do, in Discord to get on my Discord. Yoroshiku ne. So here is the constructor. Remember, we talked about the constructor before. The constructors are how you actually create objects. And so, timed message component, these line up. That means this is a constructor, and these are the things that it takes. You might think it's weird that nothing ever creates this. This method has 0 references. What's that all about? Well, that's due to something called dependency injection, which is a pretty large topic that I'm going to sort of gloss over for now, but basically, this gets called by sort of like magic that doesn't actually call this directly, which is why it can't detect any references to it. But what I have in here is I have the iTwitch client, which is a very nice third-party library called TwitchLib. Provides this, so if I look into that, it's going to download the source, decompile the source for me. And You can see it's an interface, so it means that this thing promises it can do this. Auto read listen on exception, channel emotes, and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that this can do on as events for like when you're being hosted, when the chat is clear, when there's a connection error, when there's an incorrect login, when the moderator joined, moderator left, and like all this kinds of stuff that you can do. I have not even scratched the surface of what TwitchLib can do with borrrbot. Will replace emotes. I mean, there's been a lot of effort put into this. And it's gonna automatically recognize that the exclamation point is set up for commands. So basically all I do is just set these aside for later. If you go into a class and you immediately have something that looks like variables that we talked about before, like here's an iLogger, here's an integer, a join channel, and a Twitch client, these are things that this thing stores inside itself. Nobody outside can see because they're all private. But let's see what happens when it activates. So first I check to see if it's I've defined something called master channel, which I say this is the master channel. This is the one where I want the full functionality. If I'm putting borrrbot in someone else's channel for some reason, then I don't want it to do as much stuff because I don't want it to bother people, especially with this one. So if the channel is not boarded, then I immediately just return. I don't do anything. I might have set this up a little bit badly. I might have made this one after I, so if it is my channel, then this is I get the channel, which is just boarded, and then when there's a message received, I increment the message counter. This is what we call a lambda, or a closure. This is basically the same as saying this. So if I put this down here, private void blah object sender, oops, on message received args. So every time, this is called an event. So when you add something to an event, it means that every time that this object says this event happened, that it's going to do this. And you can make it stop doing that by adding the minus instead. Minus e. Blah. So you might think this is weird, plus and equals right next to each other. Let's just have a quick review about that. So we have, say we have I is 0. We can do I equals I plus 1. Or we can do I plus equals 1. Or I plus plus. These three are all the same thing. So this is shorthand for this, which is shorthand for this. It just means that take it, add something to it, and assign it back. So take I, add 1 to it, and write it back to I. So after this, I will be 1. After this, I will be 2. And after this, I will be 3. You can also do this, I equals I plus 2. I plus equals 2. But you can't do I plus plus. I plus plus only means 1. So in this case, after this line it'll be 2, and after this line it'll be 4. But taking that and thinking about it a little bit more abstractly, we say that this event, we're adding this method to it, and then assigning it back. And then, conversely, take this, we remove this, and then we assign that back. And then with the closure, this is just taking the method, this, and putting it just in line there, without making a separate function. And then for the perform, I want to check if there's been 5 messages since my last message from borrrbot. And if there has been, then I want to reset the message counter and send the message to the channel. If there hasn't been, then I just return. Okay, so I know why this will still work. If this is not my channel, if it's not the master channel, then it's not going to ever add this, so this is never going to happen. Message counter is never going to increment from 0, so this is just always going to be returning, and never actually send a message. That's how I prevent it from writing to other people's channels, because I don't want to bother them. So there's only one component in here. But actually, if I go into here, I forgot that I had these, but let's try a simple command, like the toast command. So here's an actual command for the bot, and remember how I said after the colon means that this thing promises to do everything this thing can do? Well, this is instead of being yellow and starting with I like this one is, it's green and it doesn't start with I. That means it's an actual different class, which means that this is like a child of this, and everything this can do, this can do. So what I mean by that is, this is actually an abstract class. Abstract classes are a special kind of class in that they have abstract methods, like this. So I'm glad that this one came up, because this demonstrates the concept of both abstract and virtual. So this is an only abstract classes can have abstract methods. So you might be wondering what abstract means. Well, when you think of the word abstract, you think of like a sort of description of something, but not the full version. Basically what this is, it's saying that anything that claims to be this will have to have this method. It's really almost the same as the interface. Interface says that I have to have this method, and this method, and this property, and this property, and so on and so forth. So abstract classes say, if this is abstract, then anything that derives from it, when I say derive for it, I mean do this, must also have this inside of it. And I do this because this is a required method from ibot command, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do yet at this point, so I kind of defer it down the line to the next. But I also have something in here called virtual. Virtual is almost the same thing, except it's not required. But that means that it needs... this has some logic, right? Let's go to this one. This has something in here, right? So, by default, this is what it will do. But since it's virtual, that means that my toast command, or any other command that does this, can also choose to change the way that this behaves. I don't think that my toast... well, I mean... I don't think my toast method does, but let's see if we can find one that actually does. Navigate, derive symbols. Aha, here's one, the set game command, which, you know, I haven't actually put into good use yet, but this one when it says base, it means I want to do this first. I'll do this first, and then I'll do my own logic, which is I'm going to return if the channel is my channel or not. If it's my channel, then go ahead. I don't want to be able to set the game on other people's channels. So I'll return true or false, depending on what channel I'm in. But I don't have to override this. By default, it will just do this. It'll return true every time. So I also hold some other things that are useful for all the commands in here, like the Twitch client, so I don't have to define it every single time. Let's see what happens here. This looks odd. This is just static and toast command. So static is a slightly complicated topic. But, for example, here are two variables. One of the variables is static and one of the variables is not static. Static entries, static functions, static variables, static constructors, they all mean that it's the opposite of non-static. Let's talk about non-static because it's easier to explain. If I have something that's non-static in C#, static has different meanings in C and C++, but for C#, non-static means that for every toast command that I create, it's going to have its own version of this, because it's not static. But static will be shared between every instance of the toast command, so they can all see the same data, but they'll all have their own version of this one. So what that means for a constructor is that the first time this class is accessed, it's going to have this get run just once. Then the next time it's accessed, next time, no. This one is the regular constructor. It gets called every time. This one gets called once at the beginning. And so I do that so that I can read into this static read-only variable, because static read-only variables can only be changed inside of the static constructor, and only once. Because they're read-only, they're not meant to be changed. But they need to have somewhere to set them, or else they'll never be anything. So the rule is that these kinds of read-only variables can only be set inside of constructors. So I read out of toast.json, and then I read it into my toast data. So this is the same as before with JSON. Remember, it looks like this. This means that the entire thing is a list. Everything in the list has a name and a recipe. This one's name is that, and the recipe is that. Name is this, recipe is that. So it reads all those into memory so that I can pick them apart when I need to. So when it comes time to handle the command, first I see if there's more than one argument. So if you type exclamation point toast with nothing else, it'll go down here. Wait a minute. Okay. Aha, yeah. It'll just choose a random one. But if you type something after, the exclamation part toast, like exclamation point toast shroom, or exclamation toast star kill, then this wasn't the functionality that it originally had. It originally would just ignore it unless it was, if you put in the actual name of something in this list, like you put in exclamation point toast eggs benedict, then it will look up this recipe and give it back to you. And you can see it doing that by doing this. It's going to look for that key inside of toast data. Alright, hold on guys, I gotta be right back for a second. Alright, sorry about that, I am back. So, as you can see, it might be easier to actually show you this in action. So let's start up borrrbot here. May ignore all that stuff, it's not that important, but if I type in exclamation point toast into the chat, then here it comes in. And so I have no arguments because I didn't type anything after it. That's normal, that's expected. And so the count is going to be 0. This is testing if it's greater than 0. So if it's not greater than 0, see, false. So it's going to go down here instead. And this is what we talked about before with the if else. So instead, it's going to get the next random number between 0 and 30. And it got number 14. And so it's going to take the 15th entry because 0 starts at 0, so 14 is the 15th entry, and so pulls out a toast entry. It's French onion, and then it's going to make the message blah 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 blah, and then send it to the channel. So after I do this, it's going to probably type toast again. Same thing. And this time, the next index is going to be 21, so it's going to hit the 22nd one, which is whitefish salad with apple slaw. Very nice. Now let's say that I wanted to look at the French onion one again. I'll type toast French onion. This time, look at the arguments. There's two of them because they're split by space. So there's French and onion. So the count is 2, which is greater than 0. So this time, it will enter into the if part. But I'm going to combine them back together into French onion. This is a weird looking thing. That's a kind of an advanced topic. And then I'm going to find the first one inside of toast data where the name matches the full name, which is French onion. So, did I find it? Yes, I did. This is shorthand for if this is actually a value instead of null. Like you see this word null here. Null means no value. So if it's not null, or in other words, it has a value, it'll use this one. If this is null for some reason, it has no value, I'll do that one next. It's going to do this other thing. But it did find it, so it's going to directly just use it. So continue on. There comes French onion into the chat again. Now let's say I do like toast shroomy. Shroomy. One of my favorite streamers. You should go and check him out. But anyway, see how his name is here in the arguments list now. Since this is 1, it goes into here. But this time, found is null. You can see that there. Since found is null, it's not going to use it. It's going to use instead this. And basically, I use this algorithm, which, don't worry about it too much. I use this algorithm to turn this into a number, and it'll turn it into the same number every time. So, let's see, what will shroomy go to? Shroomy will be 30. Oh no, it'll be 6, sorry. It'll be 6. And so, what is the entry for shroomy? Crab avocado. If I were to type the same thing again. Return 6 again, as expected, and now comes crab avocado again. Now let's see what happens if I type like Starkills. Another streamer that I like. Very much. She is so super cool. But, as usual, this is greater than 0, and so in comes Starkills, and her name will go to 18. And so, her toast is hot pastrami. And if I type her name again, hot pastrami again it is. So that's an example of a command. The quip command works almost exactly the same. Here's a little bit more complicated of a command, but this is for X-plane. This is the METAR command. METAR is a weather report in aviation, one form. And so, actually, that's not the complicated one, actually, I forgot. It looks into the X-plane folder, my X-plane folder anyway, I hard-coded it in here. And looks for the last entry. You can see this is an example of for each. For each is basically the same as for, except it's doing this. Starting at 0. So it would be like this. Reverse. I less than or equal to temp.count. I plus plus. Our line equals temp element at I. Or I could just do it like this. Dot to array. Because this looks a little bit more natural to what people from other languages might be expecting. So this thing, it reads it in, and then while it's... Oh, it would be this, not less than or equal to. And see, it even tells me this can be converted into a for each loop, because it knows. It's basically taking this value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until the end of however many this thing has, and going that number of times. That's a for each loop. Then I look for another if statement. The line starts with the argument that I gave. This argument has to be 1. Now I need to be better about telling the sender that they've messed up if they haven't done it. So like, and then it'll send whatever it reads, that whatever it's read, to the channel. So to give an example, let's run borrrbot again. I can do metar from my home airport, Kilo Alpha Lima Bravo, and it's read the information out of that and just pasted it in there into the chat. It's useful for getting the exact conditions out of the simulator instead of in the real world because they don't always match up. What's this? Oh. Like for example, here's a command that has some sort of error handling. This is either an English or a Japanese command, which will translate between English and Japanese. And if it doesn't get anything to translate, then it's going to send a whisper to the person and says like, "Hey, what are you doing?" But yeah, that's basically how commands are implemented. There's some other ones in here, like shoutout command I use quite a bit. I don't know how many moderators, I'm my only moderator. So, it sends a whisper if they do it wrong. So if I don't give someone the shoutout to, it's gonna tell me, hey, 86 Escape, what is going on, man? Or, what's going on over there? I've been just going through my chatbot to try to make a video for people who are interested in programming. It's kind of a beginner, so I'm going really slow and giving out the basics. I'm not back at it, I'm just making a one-off. This is a special stream to make up for the one that I missed yesterday. I'm just sort of going over this to try to encourage people to see that programming is not such a scary thing. So in here, I get the number of arguments. Has to be 1. Has to be just a person to shout out to. So if it's not 1, then it's going to go in here. And if it is 1, then it's going to skip outside. But if it's not 1, then it's going to send a whisper saying, "Looks like you are trying to use the shoutout command, but I don't understand the arguments that you gave. You must provide the username to receive the shoutout, for example, Borden. Yes, please shout out me." And it goes back without doing anything. Otherwise, it'll get the user that was provided, and then they'll get a shoutout. So let's see that in action. Let's do a shout out to Virtual81, one of my Australian streaming friends. There we go. So I type that in, And here we come. Arguments inside here, we get virtual81. And the username who sent it is me, Borden. So the account is 1. This means it's not 1. So the opposite of not being 1 is being 1. And since it is 1, this statement is false. The count of arguments is 1. So not equals 1 is false. So it's going to skip that. Get the shoutout recipient, which is virtual81. Create the message. And then send the message to the Twitch channel. Yeah, that was easy. Very easy. So, let's take a look at how borrrbot actually is extensible and gets to register things. So here is the bot. Remember when I talked about iBot before? Has things like bot name and the OAuth token and the channel, the commands and the components. So, as I noted before, when you have this after, it means that this class promises to do everything that this says. This interface says that it has to have a bot name, OAuth, channel, list of bot commands, list of components, and this method registers support types, which I didn't really get into. So, and it does. It has the bot name, it has the bot auth, it has the channel register support types, get bot commands, and get bot components in it. So very nice. And so here's where things get really tricky. I'm giving back types, right? I'm not giving back actual objects. I'm giving back types of objects. So at the high level, what I want to be done here is I want to say the commands that I want available to me are this command, this command, this command, this command, this command. I don't want to actually make them, I just want to say what they are. So that's done by doing this method that I wrote. An assembly in C#, don't worry too much about this, this is getting off into like kind of insane land, but an assembly in C# is just a collection of code and whatnot for C# to use. So when I make borrrbot.commands, remember how I said it was a shared library? The name for a shared library in C# is an assembly. And so I can use these methods to get the types that I want. So remember how I said that all the commands have to be iBot commands. And this is in the namespace borrrbot.handlers, which means that its full name is borrrbot.handlers.ibot command. The usage for bot commands is something that I'm going to do in a minute, but I use it for instantiating them without actually creating them one by one. So you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. When I get to that part, let's go back to the bot. So this will list all of the inside of this assembly, everything that implements this interface. And so that means that everything in this folder, set game command, shoutout command, brb command, exit bot command, hide me command, audio command, cheer command, dance command, all that stuff. No, this is not returning a list of the actual commands. It's one level up from that. It's returning the types of the commands that they are. The reason why I do that is because of dependency injection. I can't actually create them directly because of... Yes, I'm going to be reflecting over those types and then creating them via dependency injection. Because all of them all of them actually have to do something like this. Like, here's the translation, like, where's the bot command abstract class? See how it takes this as the first argument, Twitch client? Well, I don't actually have access to that everywhere. So, I use the dependency injection. And let's see how that works. And the same thing for the same deal for components. So I have a this is where you're starting to see it come together. Register singleton and blah 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 blah. So why do I have 0 references to it? Alright, I gotta do an actual search for it. Get bot commands. Here in bot engine is where we do it. So way down in bot engine, which knows nothing about these commands actually, is going to instantiate them by looking into the container. The container, I'm going to gloss over a lot of this because this is an advanced topic that I even presented to like actual developer conferences and stuff, but dependency injection means I want to use something that I know nothing about. Well, almost nothing about. The only thing I know about it is that it's one of this interface. So it can do this, 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 and this. I don't know anything else about it other than this is what it can do. But C# lets you actually go like one level, like get meta on yourself, really. And it lets you take a type, which is what I'm returning there, and actually create it without saying new this, new that. You can give it the type and say to C#, I want this class. And the way that I don't do it directly in here, I think, but you have to use the activator class. Oh, I do one, but that's in a different project, so I will leave that one alone. Yes, dependency injection is one way. What you're describing is what we call mocking, where you take your logic and you make an interface out of it, and then when you're testing, if you don't actually have to test one part of it, you want to test another part which depends on that part, you can have that one part be just a sort of simple implementation that only returns like the same thing every time. That's what you want to test, and test how the other thing reacts to this given input. So I have debate with myself about the usefulness of that, because sometimes you're creating interfaces just for the sake of testing, and then you're sort of crossing the line and not keeping it simple anymore. Well, I don't have any unit tests in here, but oh, I see what you mean, seeing it used in somewhere besides unit tests. Yeah, no, it's very useful, especially in my for example, in my job, I write a C# library that has to be used on many platforms, but I don't have some of the functionality in the cross-platform API, so therefore I have to use dependency injection to... The big example is getting a default directory. So getting a default directory in a desktop is fairly easy. You just have to find the executable, and well, for our case, you find the executable and you go next to it. But Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, UWP, they're all sandbox, so you have to actually get the correct place you can actually write. And there's no one method that does it on all the platforms, so you have to have dependency injection. So, sorry about anyone who's watching the VOD, I kind of went off on a slightly advanced tangent there, but the way that it relates here is, let me show you something. Let's just start running it and see what comes up. Let's put a breakpoint there. So don't worry about that. This container is basically, you could say that, how can I describe it to someone who's not familiar with it? It's like you're seeing, it's like you have a bag of stuff, and you can only see, like, through a little peephole of the bag. So you know the inside is a whole bunch of these bot commands, but you have no idea like how they're different from each other. You just see like, I have 8 bot commands. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something else. So stepping back for a minute, it's like you have a bunch of different masks. Not masks. He's saying, I want something that behaves like this. I don't know what it is, but I want something that behaves like this. Inside the container, you have a bunch of different behaviors. You have things that are responsible for doing those behaviors. You don't have to actually know what they are, you just have to know that they are capable of doing this behavior. And, as a bonus, if I use the container by saying container.getInstance, right? That'll give me back, that can only ever, well, not ever, but usually only gives me back an interface. Because I want something that's capable of doing this. And what it actually is depends on the environment that I'm in. If I'm in a testing environment, it'll give me this. If I'm in a production environment, it'll give me this, so on. That's why I say it's an ibot command. So it's going to return me back an ibot command. But the cool part about it is that if I've added other stuff to the ibot, to the container, like the iTwitch client, then when I go, for example, into the, let's say the toast command again, see how this toast command has iTwitch client inside of it? Well, I never actually call this constructor. The container just knows how to make it because it says, ah, you know what? I have something that can behave like this, so I'll just give it to this command as I make it. See if I can put a breakpoint there. So let's go through this a little bit. So remember the for each loop just takes everything out of here and processes it one at a time. So what's the first command type? The first type is borrrbot.commands.user.explain command. That's this thing. This will take the metar and parse it and explain it in English. And then it's asking the container to get this class. So when you ask it for a class, it's usually kind of meaningless to ask it for a class because if you have a class, you have a class, you know exactly what it is. But in this case, I'm using it as a sort of like initializer because I want to get the iTwitch client out of it. So another way I could do this would be like this. Well, actually, I couldn't even do it like that. I could try. This will be really awkward though. Like, for example, here. Equal the client, not client, container, get instance, iTwitch client. This will give me the Twitch client, and then I can go through one by one and be like, var foo equals activator dot create instance. Command type, and where's the one I can? Oh man! Binding flags dot public finder. Oh. Sorry, I missed that one down there. I don't need to do that. I need to just do the arguments in here. So, Twitch client. And hope that every one of these I remembered to put in the correct thing. I'll just run it like that and see which one it actually fails on, to kind of demonstrate this example. So there's the Twitch client that I got out of it. First one is the explain command. There's foo. I was able to instantiate it. But this one gives me the same thing for less work. So why would I do it this way when there's a lot easier way to do it? Get rid of that. So this part it will do automatically for me, since it detects that inside the explain command, first it tries to create it like this, with nothing. But it fails because that one doesn't exist. So next it tries to look at the other ones and see if everything in here it knows about. For example, it knows Twitch client, but it doesn't know what's a good one I can do? Like iMetar report. No, I can't do that because let's just say like query provider, why not? Because it doesn't really matter. The point is that this one it doesn't know about. So if I try to do this, it's going to give me an error. See? No registration for type explain command could be found. Could not be an implicit one could not be made. Contains the proper with name foo and type iQuery provider that is not registered. Please ensure iQuery provider is registered or change the constructor of explain command. So you know that normally when you create things with constructors, we do a new, like we said. Explain command equals new explain command. But actually we can't do it here because it doesn't know about it. It's in a different place that's higher up. It's getting injected in. So there's two reasons why it's good to do it this way. The first reason is that you don't have to know what commands are in it. So if I just add any command that implements this interface, that does this :ibot command, as soon as I add it, it's there. And I don't have to remember to like, oh, I have to add it to this list or whatnot. No, it's just there. And the second is I can put this lower down. I don't have to put these engine and commands together. I can distribute them separately. So let's continue in the logic. So like before, the first command type I got is the explain command, so it gets one, then it adds the command. So remember before I said it has the ability to initialize itself. So it goes in here. This one has no overridden stuff, so it just sets the engine and returns true. And then if it's successful, which this one was, it adds it to the command map. And then it goes on to the next one, dynamically pulling out all of the commands in here based on some criteria. So the next one is the cheer command. Add that one. So is it successful? This one has overridden stuff. So OBS is usable. This one is a tough one because it is checking to see if it can connect to Streamlabs. So it was able to connect to Streamlabs, so good, it's successful, adds it to the map. And this goes on and on and on and on until we get down here. Oh, see, now we've gone into the toast command. See, it's provided me with a iTwitch client because I already previously registered that. So let's get rid of that. Now we're done, and we can have a look at the command map. See that we have 14 commands. Explain, cheer, dance, en commands, gap, metar, quip, toast, brb, exitbot, hide, sec game, and so. All dynamically registered via reflection. And we do the same thing for all the components. And this is a hack that I did, so I'm sorry that this is here, but don't even remember why I did this, but I didn't want to add it for some reason. So, you've slurped up this kind of stuff from inside the assembly. And then we've created the engine here, right? So this one sort of dynamically adds things. Oh, I know. I wanted to add the time message component in from the settings. That's probably why I did that. So let's ignore that part. That's just adding more components manually, as is this. Well, this is adding the commands. But after we're done setting all this up, we call engine.start, which is where more goodness happens. So it's going to get the connection credentials, get the Twitch client, initialize the client, and then set up the client to do this whenever it gets a chat command, and activate the scheduler when it gets connected, and then actually call connect. So let's go down to here. This is, remember what we said before, this is the event. So it says that when a chat command is received, every time I detect that there's a chat command, well, not I, this is someone else's thing. Every time this object detects that there's a chat command, which is something that begins with an exclamation point by default, it's going to invoke this, which is down here. And when it's connected, it's going to call this, which activates the scheduler. Let's see what that looks like. Let's put, remember this is here, we added on chat command received plus equals that. That means chat command receives, we're going to get this called. So for now, this is going to just go through and finish up, and things are going to go on. And let's see what happens if we type in something. Let's try the hello command. This is, as soon as it detects that there's exclamation point chat command received, it comes into here. And then what I do to figure out what to do with that is I look in the command map. There's 17 things in there. And I try to get the value, the command text was hello, and see if there's something in there. Oh, there was. Okay, so what's its permission? Remember that this permission thing comes from this ibot command, which says that I don't know what this is, but it can do this, and this, and this, and that. So it has the ability to say what permission it has. So this permission is user. This is a switch statement. So it looks at the value inside of here and has a list of cases for what it could possibly be. Is it owner? Is it moderator? It's like a more efficient if statement. So owner, or moderator, or user. In this case, it's user. Don't need to do anything special, but if it were a moderator, I want to check to see if the chat message is a moderator or it's the broadcaster, because for some reason the broadcaster is not a moderator, which is weird. Then if it's owner, I just want to check if it's the broadcaster. If it's not the broadcaster, then don't do anything. Ignore it. It's not allowed. If it's a moderator permission, then if it's not moderator and it's not the broadcaster, then it's someone not allowed to use this. Return. User doesn't need to check anything. Anybody can use this, just get out. And then you've got the command, since it was registered before. And so we send down the command, the username, and the arguments. It goes into the hello command, is the hello, not the response command, I mean. And so this response will replace the message. I put in sort of a bookmark here. So that's actually coming from here. So when they type the hello command, it goes hello username. And this is just sort of like a placeholder that I put in. So when it comes down to here, in the response, I could do more than just this, but for now it's just username that I replace. Now where has things gone? Response command. So I want to replace username with the actual username, so right now it's hello username. After this, the response becomes hello Borden. And then send the message to the channel. And there you have it. It says hello to you. Why are things getting so dark? They were so light before, now they're so dark. Let's try typing like gibberish. So here's the command text. We got gibberish. And do we have a command called gibberish? No, we do not. So this is going to say it's going to be false. So it's going to skip this entire thing and just come back without doing anything. So one more topic that I'll go over before I end the stream today is the topic of exceptions. You'll notice something here that says try and catch. In the world of C and the world of classic C++ before 2011, there's no concept of exceptions really. They were sort of a new thing that were added in the maybe early 2000s. I'm not sure exactly when they were added, but what it means is that usually when you run a program, it goes into some method, goes from top to bottom, and then it comes back. But in some cases, it's not possible for it to continue. So let's say you have a method that opens a file and returns you back the text. What if you put in, and I'll say like this. Let's say you have a method, contents of file, and you pass it in the path you want to read from, and then you return. You would do something like on open file, read contents into string, return string. But what if this path doesn't exist? You would open the file, and then you would try to open the file, but that wouldn't exist, and so what would you read here? Nothing. So instead, if file does not exist, you throw an exception. Oops. And return early. I can show you an example of what this looks like. Let's go back up to our main here. Private, static, int, get magic number. So let's say if input is bad, throw new invalid operation exception. input is bad. Otherwise, return 42, the magic number. So let's say X is going to be get magic number good. Then we'll say reset it to get magic number bad. So in this way, you go in, input's not bad, so we return a number. Very good, we get a number. This is exactly how you would expect things to go, but then suddenly you pass in bad. This is bad, so it throws. Uh-oh, unhandled exception. So when you run it without the debugger, it looks like this. Unhandled exception, input is bad. But if you do this, catch invalid operation exception, then you can just write line. Input was bad, skipping. This will allow you to stop that from happening. Let's run that in the debugger again. Dun, 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 dun. So we caught that, we write that to the console, input was bad, skipping. X remains 42, and we can continue. So exceptions are for exceptional conditions. That's why they're called exceptions. So like if you try to read the contents of a file, and the file doesn't exist, that's an exceptional condition. And you would throw an exception in C#, not in other languages. Some other languages don't like exceptions. C#, exceptions are fine. You can use them. Use them for when you cannot continue the regular path. So, for example, even if I try to do exactly what I said before, file.read all text, C foo. Watch what happens if I try to do this. Doink. Uh-oh. File not found exception. Could not find the file C foo. Oh dear. So, the reason that I do, wherever it is, this at the end, try the handle command, is because I don't know if my commands are going to throw an exception or not. And if I don't want them to throw an exception and bring down the entire bot. So let's say instead of this, I go throw new application exception. Now let's run that. And this will, every time you say hello, it's going to throw an exception. So exclamation part hello, exclamation point hello, and then see, now inside of here, you have this message fail. Error running the command for hello. System application system error in the application. Blah. But I can keep continuing. For example, I can do the lurk, or not lurk because lurk's on the same command, but I can do the I can do the toast command. See, toast keeps working just fine. But if I didn't have this guard here, and just ran it like that, let's try hello again and see what happens with the exception. Nothing. Didn't get anything. Is it still working though? No. Borrrbot is sort of like dead in his tracks now. I don't know why I didn't bring the... Oh, it didn't bring down the entire program because it's on a different thread. So now he can't go back to... he can't go back to the handle command. So, sort of things are just silently failing now. I don't like that. I really don't like that, so put back in the try catch, just log a message, put a message out to the console, in this case, about what happened. Let's run hello again. And then you can go move on with life. You know, sometimes things happen. Don't want this to bring down the entire process. I can do toast again. And you can see that it's received the message, and it's put back out miso salmon toast. Very nice. So that's what try catch is for. Sort of the last line of defense. If this were to go all the way up to the top on the main, then the whole program would actually go down. So if I throw an application exception here, then that, like we saw before, unhandled exception, and then the program just stops. It's actually more desirable than the other behavior, which is to just sort of panic and stop doing anything. Alright. Now it's so dark here. Hello? Let me see if I can get that up a bit. Webcam. Settings. Video. I hate that it focuses by itself, so stop focusing by yourself. And give me more brightness, please. I have an old webcam, I'm sorry. I need to get a, What's that? Wow, I can't see your name because it's so blue on my black background. Hello. Too bad you came in here just as I was finishing up. But I've just gone through an entire tour of how I've developed my chatbot. I might have gotten a little bit complicated at times, but after, a third of my life developing software, it's hard to come at things from a beginner's perspective. It's easy to answer questions, but, well, more or less. But it's hard to... Oh, thank you. I usually don't have a dark background. So I wonder what happens if I switch... Oh, it's the same color as mine now. Very nice. I like it. It's my favorite color now. This is Mr. Chase Gaming, who I like to watch when he's kind enough to come on and stream. Wait, I can't do that right now because I'm not actually running the bot. I turned it off for development. Wait, let me turn it on again. There we go. Now, it takes 2 seconds. We were just working on it. So, I've just gone... Yeah, I'm just finishing up now. I've got to get ready for... I'm actually... Now that I've presented all this programming stuff on stream, I get to go to an actual developer event and present some more stuff. Just tons more advanced stuff. So I'll be a little bit preparing for that. I'll be getting dinner. And I'm going to save this VOD so that people can watch it again in case they are curious about getting more into programming, because I tried my best to come at it very gently and so that they would not feel intimidated by it. But I also wanted to keep some advanced topics in there just in case, some more intermediate people came along and they wanted to get a little bit more feel of things. But how are things for you? You gonna stream anytime soon? My next stream, by the way, will be on Friday. I'll be back in the flight sim after screwing up X-Vision somehow, but miraculously recovering it. And hopefully people will show up. Last week I had a kind of a bad stream because we were having a house guest and they came home sort of like an hour into the stream, and I didn't want to just sit in here streaming because it was the day that they were packing to leave. So I did not make this animated background. No, this is way too complex for me. I found this somewhere. Might change it up sometime soon. It doesn't really match up with a lot of the things that I do. Oh, this sounds familiar. Oh, this is, yeah, a Mega Man song. Tomorrow night. Alright, I will make a note of that. So wait a minute. If you're in the UK now, that means that it's like... Oh, must be just getting up in the morning then. 5 minus 9. Yeah, like 7 in the morning? What time is it in the UK? Sat at work, 8:11 a.m. Way to be. Is that the time you usually get there? Changes it, Cool. Are you gonna get a lot of work done today? Alright, I should start looking for people to host. Aha! Well, thank you. Thank you for coming to see what I was up to. I think there were 2 people that were chatting today. I don't get a lot of viewers for... the programming type streams, so I don't do them that often, but just wanted to make one for the people who said they were interested. And so why don't we go over to... Oh, there are not a lot of people streaming right now on my followers list. Well, how about we go for... Looks like... Oh, good, another developer is also streaming. I hosted Growl last time that I had a stream. So... And since this is a development stream, I'm trying to send to another developer. This guy is actually more popular than me, so he doesn't need it, but his name is Mike and he works for a game company and he makes games. He uses the same language. He fell asleep last stream, is that what happened, or for crying out loud? So let's go raid him, Mike, in principle. Let's hope that I spelled that right. Yep. Alright guys. Thanks for stopping by, and if you watch the VOD, thanks for watching the VOD. I appreciate anyone who comes by to talk to me. I'll be back on Friday with some flight sim, and then hopefully again next Monday back into the routine of I gotta beat Ori. I'm almost done with Ori. Yeah. Well, anyway, have a nice night or morning or afternoon wherever you are, and see you again soon.